This is the Mechanical Care Forum, and it's season 14. This season, we're capitalizing on the natural happenings of the day. We're chewing the fat on things related to mechanical assessment and patient treatment in the musculoskeletal space with special guests on the ride home. Today, we're joined by Kristi Maguire, talking about working alongside other medical disciplines, a bit on communication between clinicians for better care, a couple of challenging patients she's seen today, and even a little discussion on documentation. All this on the ride home, today on MCF. Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast for season 14. There have been several occasions in my career where I've had the opportunity to spend some time with some very talented clinicians. I'm referring to times when I've sat down with a colleague at the end of the day or after a patient encounter and discussed the situation. I've also had a chance to travel with some pretty amazing mechanically trained therapists on one of our humanitarian efforts in Peru and chat about a few memorable patients, or I've connected on the phone with a faculty member who's had a memorable patient response in their physical exam that day. It's been some of these moments where I've drawn a clinical pearl or two, which is in a small way added to what's helped me become the clinician I am today. So this season, I'm catching up with my guests after they've had a typical day in the clinic or in their work, and we're just using the natural course of the day to be the content we draw from, and in some small way, gain a little further knowledge, inspiration, or motivation, or just put things back into perspective on the ride home. Don't worry, we'll keep our eyes on the road and our hands on the wheel. Just have a discussion. So buckle up with us and tag along in the backseat. This episode is brought to you by Therapha. Therapha is a front-end patient intake digital platform to obtain a great portion of the medical history and pertinent symptom history from your patient. Think of it like when your colleague gives you the lowdown on a patient, a summary of all the relevant information and not bothering you with the unimportant things. Imagine if you had a colleague take the history for you. It might go something like, okay, you're about to walk in on a 70-year-old female. She's a preschool teacher and walks a mile 3 days a week. She's got a 3-week history of right hip and thigh pain to the knee with no leg paresthesia. She says it came on for no reason. The pain is worse, and it's worsening with walking, especially after prolonged sitting. You get the drift. In other words, it's like having a digital assistant to help you get to the heart of the matter a little quicker, so you know where you need to ask a layer or two deeper questions and where to invest the time in the physical exam. In my opinion, after using Therapha for several months, it's ideal for the busy clinic where time is of the essence. And right now, Sinju, the CEO and founder of Therapha, has a super generous deal. Only for MCF listeners. You get the first 2 months, full access, totally free. Just go to therapha.com/join/MCF. Therapha is spelled THERAPHA. So that's therapha.com/join/MCF to get the first 2 months free. This episode is also brought to you by Atlas Health. Atlas Health is a web-based exercise and education delivery system. It's tailor-made for those of us who use specific end-range repeated movements. So my question to you is, are you still drawing stick figures or using photocopies or the closest thing you can find on Google for your patient's home program? Are some of your patients coming back doing the exercises wrong or doing something completely different? If so, you're long overdue to learn about Atlas Health. Atlas Health is the future of patient guidance between sessions. It's a digital platform with meticulously precise animation, education, and clinician modifiable instruction. In short, it's a better way to deliver your exercise and education. So improve the impression you give your patients, reduce the time lost when patients get it wrong, and enhance the delivery of your care with Atlas Health. All right, listen, so go to atlashealthx.com/MCF, because just for MCF listeners, the guys at Atlas Health are allowing us to use a code ATLASMCF25 for immediate access and a free trial for up to 25 patients. So if Atlas Health is new to you and you need to see a demo first, go to atlashealthx.com. And don't forget, you won't find this offer anywhere else. So if you want to take advantage of this right now, use the code again, ATLASMCF25 at atlashealthx.com/MCF. Okay, let's get on with it today. Our guest today, Kristi Maguire. She's a PT, a diplomat in MDT, an orthopedic clinical specialist. She's an outcomes accountable clinician and a mentor within integrated musculoskeletal care in Greenville, South Carolina, USA. Come along, ride with us on the ride home. So today we're chatting at the end of your work day, and we're excited to fire up the podcast here for season 14. Who better to start us off than the one and only Miss Kristi Maguire? Kristi, thanks for letting us ride along on your way home today.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's my pleasure, Jason.
Yep, absolutely. So at the end of your work day, tell us, if you weren't talking to me, besides listening to my podcast, of course, what do you typically do on your drive home?
I just listen to the radio or call and figure out what's going on for the evening.
Catching up with family.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I know you got several plates spinning, so I'm sure you're trying to get a handle on what's coming when you do arrive home.
All good.
Yeah. So, Kristi, talk to us a little bit about you're a clinician that's in a practice. Tell us a little bit about your practice and the setting and your responsibilities professionally.
Okay. So I'm in a practice that is, with IMC, it's integrated musculoskeletal care. And we contract here with the Michelin Tire Company. So I am on campus at the manufacturing site, and it's separate from the manufacturing, but on campus. And we have 3 to 4 nurse practitioners and 1 doctor, and we have occupational health that's also connected, and we have condition management nurses. And then we've got, of course, our clinic that's also within the same building. So it's quite a nice setup, and it's all orthopedic. I do see vestibular patients as well, so they'll send those over too.
Got it. All right. Talk to us about the different practitioners that are right there beside you, and what have you learned, Kristi, over the time of working in that setting?
I think just the close connection to them has been really an amazing experience, because there are patients that I see that need either referral to them, or I need help with medication for anti-inflammatory issues, or if I just need to go through the case with them because of their health history or red flags. They're right down the hallway, and I can just go to their office and talk to them. Mm-hmm. If somebody has a problem that's not been changing like I would expect to see, and it looks more like a structural problem, and they need an MRI, I can just go talk to them and let them know what's going on and suggest an image or suggest injection or something like that. We have a pretty good relationship, so they're pretty open to what I suggest. And if they suggest something, they'll let me know kind of what they think, and we just work through it and try to get the patient care that we can give them. Yep.
Very cool. I think it's an area where most of us appreciate that better communication is probably a common thing that we all struggle with.
Yeah, and we can all improve,
Yep. So think about the patients you saw today. What kind of interaction about those patients, maybe even today, did you have with your other colleagues that are in other medical disciplines?
I just had one that I needed to talk to because he has a structural shoulder issue, and we wanted to get him an MRI. So he said he got his MRI, and the doctor had mentioned to him that it was pretty bad. It needed to go to ortho, and I went to try to find her, but she was not there today. So that was the only person I needed to talk to, just to see kind of what it was showing. Just out of interest is all.
Yep. Roughly how many visits had you seen that patient that made you come to that conclusion that maybe it's time to talk to the doc or the nurse practitioner?
This person, it was more 3 to 4, but I've seen him in the past with the same problem that never was capable of full recovery, but he was not ready to move on to ortho. So it was clearly worse, and we did look at ruling out derangement of the cervical spine and the shoulder, and then identifying that it truly was not going to change rapidly, and it looked structural to me, and we just suggested that he was ready to go to ortho. So it really didn't take too long to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. And think about your practice 15 years ago, Kristi. How would that have gone down differently, do you feel like, in a previous setting?
Okay, so I was in a hospital setting where we weren't connected with the medical group. So I don't know how many visits I would have seen him for. I mean, that 15 years ago, I'm definitely, every year, of course, you're getting better at what you do just through experience and learning. So I don't know how many visits I would have seen him, but I would have ended up calling the nurse to get the information to the doctor. And maybe the nurse calls me back and I explain it to them. And then, you know, I would probably have had the patient follow up with the doctor. And I would think that that probably would have taken several weeks to get all that process started. So this was definitely much faster.
Yeah. I remember talking to Hans von Helvert and actually talking to a couple of the doctors that came to the conference in Copenhagen. And Dr. Scapers was one of the guys who has founded that clinic, Rugpoli. And I remember him saying that he had come to the United States, I think, to meet Charles April and talk to him about better care and more expedient care. And so they have this process that I'm sure you're fairly familiar with, where they can see an MDT clinician if there's something that doesn't look that it's a rapidly reducible or something manageable. Then it's like within the same session, same day, they're getting potentially even an injection or some kind of medical decision, and then back to them really rapidly. So I'm kind of hearing that maybe it sounds similar in your setting.
Yes, we can get the imaging started, we can get the referrals, we can get the medications. The only thing that we don't get done fast is going to be the injection.
Yeah.
Because by the time you get the picture, by the time you go to the specialist, by the time they order it, you're looking at several weeks. And most people, what I found, if they're MUR and they could benefit from that injection, by the time they get it, the effect is probably not as good as it would have been had they gotten it when they really needed it. Because they're way down the road of recovery, you know, and they're generally getting better slowly over time with natural history and just the right movements at the right time. Mm-hmm. So we do struggle with that for sure.
Do you feel like
Hans doesn't have that struggle, you know, because he can get them done pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that something that you guys are working toward, to even bring that element or that piece of care in a more rapid way? Or is that really not come onto the table of discussion yet?
No, because the problem is just the process of how the patient gets there, because they don't do them in a NIC. So they referred out, and that's where the time issue is. They end up getting referred out either directly to the pain management, or they get the ortho first and then go to, you know, pain management, depending on if the ortho does it in the clinic or not. So it just sort of depends.
Yeah. So that was a good little example of your collegial relationship and being right next to the clinician, other clinicians, to talk about a patient that may need more of a medical direction. What stands out in your mind otherwise? Kristi, what did you see today?
Oh, I saw all kinds of stuff, Jason. What do you want to know?
Bring one up that comes to your mind.
Okay. Let's see. You know, the ones that come to my mind are the ones that are like challenging my brain, you know?
Yeah.
So why don't we just start with that one first? How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
All right. So we're in the process of ruling out derangement for what looks to be low back pain, although it's more like lateral low back on both sides, and it can refer down to the posterior hips and then down to mid-thigh.
Yep.
But the problem is it's very intermittent and it's very random. So this started just at maybe, I can't remember exactly because I don't have it in front of me, but it has not been more than 2 months. So it's less than 2 months ago. And it's intermittent. Let's see. It's worse with, he'll feel it when he's walking, but random and not all the time. He will feel it when he's standing. Let's see. Those are the main things. He does not have the pain rising from sitting. He does not have it when he's sitting. He can sit as long as he wants. So it's not your typical posterior derangement. He's fine sleeping. So it really is just the standing and the walking, but it's not a long-term walking issue. It's more of a random issue. So it's quite interesting. So I've seen it once in the clinic, and we're trying to bring it on and just challenge it and see what is bringing this pain on. But it's really hard to find. So the first, I just saw him for the second visit today, but the first visit we did repeated flexion in standing, repeated flexion in sitting, and we did lots and lots of that, and no changes in extension, no changes in his walking. Walking was fine. We couldn't elicit it. We went to extension in standing, it had no effect. Repeated extension in lying with overpressures to various segments of the back, so I sustained him, and sustaining was no effect. But when he got up, he's like, oh, there it is. And then it was gone, and he didn't have any mechanical changes in his movement. I'm like, okay, that was interesting. So I ended up sending him home with flexion and sitting that visit. He ended up flying to Mexico for work, and then he came back for the second visit today, and he said that had no effect. It's still random. He said he walked for a long time earlier today, had no effect, and then he was sitting for a little bit, and then he stood up. He walked out to the car. He had no effect. Then he sat in the car. He was fine, and then he got out of the car, and he felt it for like 10 steps, and then it was gone. And that was coming into the clinic today. But his movement was still the same, and I couldn't find it.
Was this an older guy, a middle-aged guy?
Oh, he's probably in his late 50s, mid to late 50s.
Yeah, okay. All right, so what does that mean to you when you hear a guy say very intermittent, very random, not very much pattern?
Right, so it's definitely not dysfunction. Let's just take that off the table, right? So it's not consistent, it's not dysfunction. It either has to be a derangement or it's mechanically inconclusive, because it's not nerve, there's no nerve root compression. So it's either mechanical, inconclusive, or derangement. So I try to keep it simple. It either has a directional preference or it doesn't. That's just sort of the way my mind thinks. So looking at lumbar extension, we reviewed extension today, and that had no effect. But then I decided, you know what, let's go up to the thoracic spine and see what we find. So after having him walk and stand, it didn't have any effect. Looking at his flexion, he did it correctly. That had no effect. We did repeat extension in standing over and over again, and that had no effect. So I knew what sustained extension did, but so instead of going there right away, I went to T-spine, and I put a ball behind his back, and we did extension in sitting with a ball, and he went back, and he goes, there it is. Finally, okay, so it's more lower T-spine versus lumbar is what it looks like, and then he went back. It would be produce no worse, produce no worse, produce no worse. Somewhat variable, because sometimes it'd be more right, sometimes it'd be more left, sometimes it'd be more symmetrical with these different reps, but they never got worse. And then he did make a comment, and I could kind of see that he could go back further before he felt it. Now, those are subtle changes, but there's nothing changing fast here, and it's either going to have a directional preference or it doesn't, So I ended up sending him home with that and exploring that direction in the lower T-spine to see what the effect was going to be. But he knows the rules. The more he does, if he feels like it's getting worse, spreading down the legs, or getting worse with standing and walking, becoming more frequent, he's going to stop. But if it's not, we're going to see if the more he does, would it actually end up getting better, or just maybe expose the problem a little bit further for me to help me understand it.
Yep. Kristi, tell me a couple of things. When you say bilateral low back, you mean not central, but just left and right-sided?
Yeah. He doesn't have any spinal pain. It's kind of interesting. It's more lateral, I don't know.
Just
lateral
posterior iliac crest kind of area?
More lateral A little bit, yeah. I would say there.
Yeah. Yeah, but then it
Lateral.
does refer buttocks and posterior hamstrings even.
Yes, it does go towards the posterior hips and into the upper thigh.
Yeah, with standing and walking. So a conventional clinician that we all kind of learned in school, we might start thinking, well, this is stenosis. See, simple.
Yeah, you would think, right? But then stenosis would be more consistent than that and not random.
Yeah.
You know? Like every time I walk, it starts at a certain distance, you know, and if I kept walking, it would typically get worse.
Yeah. All right.
You
So my
know?
other, yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that's the point to be made in this situation, the consistency. So the other question I have is if it's lumbar and referring into the posterior buttocks and thighs, how often are you needing to get into the thoracic spine? I think many people may not think to go there.
Yeah. Well, you know, lumbar wasn't doing anything and except sustained, and sustained could have been anywhere from lumbar on up, you know. So it's just one of those things. If I'm not finding anything lumbar, I better screen the thoracic spine because you just never know. And you know, thoracic spine is interesting because you either have your typical thoracic derangements that are very easy to identify, but then sometimes you have these leg symptoms or symptoms that are referred into the legs that are just inconclusive. They just don't make a lot of sense. And lumbar has been screened and it's very inconclusive, or you're really not affecting it much. Yeah. And sure enough, you go to thoracic spine and it starts to make sense. And there's our generator kind of in that region somewhere. So that's, I guess, based on experience, it kind of took me up there. I better look at that. Where is this coming from? Because it's obviously there. Something is there, you know?
Yep. Because it provoked symptoms momentarily when you extended him at the thoracic spine with that ball.
Yeah. And I think, you know, looking at day one, maybe that's where that symptom was being generated. He didn't feel any pain while he was laying there, sustained in extension. It was the after effect. You know, so clearing out lumbar, and lumbar clearly is not doing anything to this problem.
Yeah. Yeah, why wouldn't he worsen then with all that repeated flexion in sitting specifically? Because you're flexing the thoracic spine.
Right. And there's the big question, right? So I don't even know if it's a derangement.
Yeah.
You know,
we expect that would worsen him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not looking for, he's going to come back better. I hope he comes back better. No, I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking, let me send you home with this to explore this direction and learn from it. And he's either come back better, and maybe the more he did, it actually does get better. And it's sure enough, it just doesn't get worse with flexion. Or he comes back the same, it's just there every time. Or he comes back, he's like, no, it stopped. And, you know, it just aggravated it. So who knows what I'm going to get when he comes back. But that can take me to, okay, maybe we need to go unloaded extension and find a more specific segment of where this might be coming from and explore that. So I got a plan for next time. But this was after a period of time of working with him today. So I couldn't do all of that. So that's what I'm sending him home with, and we'll just learn from it until next time.
Kristi, are you thinking ahead like that? Okay, I'm going to send you away with this ball behind the back, thoracic extension sitting thing. But in your mind, or have you already thought if he comes back and he's, you know, wishy-washy about really change, not really worse, but not better, then you've already got in your mind that you're going to do prone lying extension of some sort with maybe some isolated, you know, focused specific force at certain levels? Or are you just talking to me off the cuff right now that you're talking about it, you're thinking?
No, I try to keep myself a few steps ahead.
Yeah.
That's what I try to do. You know, with every person, like even my eval, you know, if I'm going to test this first, but if this happens, I'm going to go here. But if this happens, I'm going to go here. I kind of keep myself ahead of the game.
Yeah.
As much as I can, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that as you refine your skills, perhaps this is what happens. You're thinking ahead like that. But perhaps if we're not, we might be missing the mark and even struggling at situations where we might, if we're just reactive and not thinking proactively.
Right. And of course, that definitely comes with experience, because I can't say I did that long ago,
Mm-hmm.
But once you get that experience and you understand how derangements respond to movement, and you understand how dysfunctions respond to movement and their characteristics, then you can, I could say with this particular patient, if this is a derangement in the lower thoracic spine and it needs extension, and it needs this one, then the more he does, he's going to start to go back further. It's not going to bother him as much. It's going to start to centralize. It's going to start to loosen up. And he's going to feel better. And then those random pains are going to get less frequent. That's what should happen if that's what it needs,
Yeah.
And then if it plateaus, well, let's check unloaded and see, do we need to change the load, and then add force progressions to that and see where that takes me. And if that's what it needs, it should get better if it's a derangement, right?
Yep.
So I've already tested flexion, and flexion didn't make it better. It didn't make it worse. So it clearly could be inconclusive. And if it's inconclusive and there is no directional preference, but tolerates extension well, then that's an impairment we should try to restore, but not make it worse,
Yeah.
And then slouch over correct, and we do back and forth, flexion extension, kind of back and forth. Maybe that could help if it was mechanically inconclusive. So I can see where I need to go depending on what diagnosis I get.
Yep. So this is a situation where I wonder if there are those out there that might say, well, okay, you've ruled out that it's not going to centralize. You don't find a directional preference. It's not a dysfunction because it's random. So therefore, it's not a McKenzie patient.
I guess some people might say that. they're all McKenzie patients to me, Jason.
Yeah.
Unless I refer them out. But that's a McKenzie person that we've determined needs to be referred out,
Yeah. So I'm joking, of course. And I know that you feel that way, of course. But this is a challenging area where I think it takes a while to get confident, maybe to remain confident in the system when you get to an MI or an MURS. And so how, if he comes back and he's no better, I think you hinted at it right there, talking about impairments and exposing him to extension in a progressive graded way, perhaps. But how do you manage somebody like this who doesn't have a directional preference and yet needs some relief and doesn't really have anything medical that needs to be referred out?
Yeah. So first of all, I have to step back and say, okay, this problem is not going to get better fast.
Yeah.
I'm not going to apply a movement and then come back and they're 60% better, 80% better. It's not going to act like that. So now my question is, over the next 6 to 8 weeks, because that's probably about the length of time it might take, give or take a couple weeks, can we reduce pain? Can we improve mobility? Can we improve function through addressing impairment, through range of motion, through strength and function and conditioning? And can it change slowly over time, like just a general rehab sort of approach, like we all used to do, So that's going to be my next step is, if there is no directional preference, and I might have to look lateral if one side is worse than the other. I don't know where that's going to take me yet. But let's say I've looked at all that and there is no directional preference. Then my thinking is, okay, one is how well did he handle extension? Because there's a problem there. And if he handled it well, then I got to figure out dosage, because I'm okay with produce no worse. I'm not okay with produce worse, or change in mechanics that are worse. So I got to figure out dosage for that. But then also, what about slouch over crack? I mean, there's so much that movement can offer of extension and then flexion, extension, flexion, back and forth. And the amount of nutrition that can flow through in and out of tissue just through rhythmical motion of back and forth, through imbibition of fluid and stuff like that. So that could potentially be helpful. Then I got to figure out, well, what is he doing when he is walking and he feels it? What's his spinal position? Is there something I need to change with his posture walking? I've only seen it once, and it's very random, so it's really kind of hard. But he kind of walks in a very extended sort of posture. It's kind of an interesting posture, which I might have to modify. I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm going to put that on the side. I don't know if I have to go there yet. And then, of course, just strength conditioning, getting him more active, reducing fear, too, because, it is quite random, and it doesn't really hold him back from functioning too much. So if we can reduce fear. And then see, does the frequency start to go down? Does the referral of symptoms diminish where it doesn't refer as far? Does his flexibility improve? Usually if we can see better range of motion as time goes and it's responding to movement, usually we'll see frequency getting better, intensity getting better. It's not spreading as far. It's the randomness is less frequent. So we've got a lot to think about in terms of, is this improving? Because if it's not, then he may need to, go to the doctor, or I might need to refer him on depending on his thoughts on how he feels about it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, those are the good patients that we learn a lot from, I guess, over time, and the ones that don't just melt away and resolve rapidly. So that's a good patient to talk about. All right, give us another, Kristi. What's maybe an extremity that was challenging or that was kind of enlightening today?
Okay, I had probably two interesting ones. One let's do just the one that's going to make sense to most people listening to this. The other one's going to just be like, what the heck's going on? So this person came in with bilateral anterior knee pain.
Okay.
And let's see, it's been going on for years. She's had this very chronic for years, but it would come in episodes. So the episodes would typically start with some form of activity, and she sort of knows she's going to start something if she does the activity. So it might be squats, it might be running, it might be lunges, and just kind of working out hard. And typically it will stir it up, and then it will last for a while. So this latest one came on, I believe, due to squats. She wanted to do some squats. She went ahead and did it. And that's been going on for about 4 to 6 weeks where she had the flare up. It doesn't sound like the problem actually goes away and gets fully tolerant to activity. She just manages it by avoiding stuff that would trigger it. So it is intermittent, and it can come on when she's sitting. It can come on when she's rising from sitting. She will typically see it or feel it consistently with squatting, with lunges, with stairs. If she does too much, it will start to linger and ache for a while. So it does have somewhat of a pattern of consistency, but it's still more variable in how it lingers, and intensity is sometimes different. So there's some variability to that.
Yep.
So
roughly how old?
So, she is probably in their 40s.
Okay, gotcha.
Early 40s, yeah. And then she doesn't have mechanical change complaints. So if it is worse, she doesn't feel like she moves worse, or it doesn't catch and lock up and stuff like that. So, but anyway, that's sort of the history of it in the better worse section. And then her health is absolutely fine. She has had PT in the past a long time ago. So her husband talked her into coming in to see me. So.
Yep. Kristi, I'm assuming
a lot of the families around here, hey, do you think you can help my wife? I'm like, yeah, just send her in here. So, anyway.
Yeah. I'm assuming no paresthesia.
No paresthesia, just local anterior pain, bilateral.
And no bending, twisting affecting the knees.
No.
Yeah. You know where I'm headed with those two questions, obviously.
Yeah. So the only thing interesting in regards to spine is the fact that when she sits, it will bother her. So maybe it's the bent position of the knee. Maybe knees extension, or maybe it is lumbar.
Got it.
So.
Okay. Yeah. So what did you find moving?
So you're curious, aren't you?
I'm curious. I want to know more. Tell us more.
Okay. So we did start with posture correction. She had just the right-sided knee pain while she was sitting there. So we posture corrected, and she did say that it went away.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, so maybe this is lumbar. I better not miss anything here. So then we looked at, while she was sitting there, we looked at resisted extension, resisted flexion, no pain with resistance, with manual muscle testing or through the range of motion, and no pain with resisted hamstring. So obviously contractile dysfunction is really kind of go way down on the list. Like it's probably not that, this is probably derangement. So then we stood up and we did step ups and step downs, and she felt it on both legs for that. We did a full squat all the way down and coming back up, and it was pain during movement. When she's all the way in the squat, she doesn't necessarily feel it.
Okay, up and down though.
But it's during the motion, yeah. So those are our main baselines.
Got it.
When I looked at her range of motion for lumbar, she is really flexible, flexion, extension, and side glide. There is no effect on the symptoms. And then looking at the knee motion, so she's laying supine, and her knee extension on both sides is full and pain-free, and her knee flexion was full and pain-free.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting. There's no loss of motion anywhere, but somewhat a variable pattern.
At that point, were you thinking what? What were you thinking? Location and classification?
Yeah, I was thinking this could totally be lumbar because it's both knees. The sitting posture changed it, so I was thinking, I wonder what I'm going to find in the lumbar spine. So,
well, what about the fact she's so flexible there?
Right. That's the thing. And there is no stiffness. So I thought, okay, well, maybe not. Maybe I won't see anything. I wasn't sure.
Got it.
Yep. So we ended up, I had her roll over to her stomach. We did repeated extension and lying. That was pain-free, got to the full sag. And then I added overpressure to lower lumbar, mid-lumbar, upper lumbar, and lower T-spine. And that all those were no effect and super flexible. She's like, oh, that feels good. Okay. So then we stood up and her squat was the same. Everything was the same. So that didn't do anything. So then I had to figure out, okay, well, what movement am I going to test? Because she's got full motion. There's no blockage anywhere.
Yep. So
that couldn't guide me. So the only thing that guided me was the fact that bending seems to aggravate it. Loaded, like bending sustained and sitting aggravates it, and then resisted loads aggravated it. So I thought, you know what? Let me just start with resisted extension. And I was curious about it. So because I was curious, I tested it. She's really strong in her quads, which was interesting because it seems like she said she couldn't work her quads very much, but she has really strong quads. But anyway, so we did resisted extension with the green band, and we did 15 reps on the left first, and that was no effect. But then her squat was pain-free.
On the left?
On the left.
Yeah.
So then we went to, okay, let's table that. Let's go to the right knee and do the same thing on the right knee. So we did 15 on the right, and the squat was better on the right, but it was still there. So I said, well, let's do 15 more. Let's just do another set and see what happens. And then that was pain-free.
Did her
and
left
then the left started coming back.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So I told her, I said, okay, that makes sense because if we do find a movement that's going to make it better, it's not going to typically last very long, at first. So then we did another set on the left, another set on the right. We went to the stairs, and the stairs were pain-free.
Okay, got it.
Okay. All right, I'm calling this right now a derangement extension principle for both knees. So we'll see. We'll see how it pans out when I see her next. But
yeah, as much. Sorry to cut you off. As much attention as XPOS study and all of this indicators papers and all, and ruling out the spine and being thorough, and then hearing about loss of motion at the spine, no loss of motion local to the extremity joint, we start thinking, okay, gosh, there's lots of hints here that both symptoms coming on, both knees coming on and episodically together. But it doesn't mean that you can't have something local there. Right.
Yeah, the odds I thought were lumbar.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm thinking this might be bilateral, but it really wasn't.
Yeah.
As of right now, so I mean, obviously the assessment's still ongoing.
Yeah, sure. And I guess the fact that sitting requires both knees to be sustained in flexion, and it could foreseeably be something. And if that's I think of the Masio paper that talked about those of position vulnerabilities and the things that are opposite of the movement that reduces it. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so maybe we have to be careful about not overly or failing to jump to the spine and stay there too long, or ignore looking at the extremity joints just because both joints, in bilateral legs come on together or they're
Mm-hmm.
coexisting.
And yeah, and sometimes it'll be more, she would report worse on the right, sometimes it's worse on the left, So there's some back and forth with it.
Yeah.
It's hard
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah. Yeah. Good patient. Let me ask this. I touched base with you before you were finishing up and you were working on your notes. Tell me how you love note taking, your documentation. What have you seen over the years of working in the clinic? How do you manage that? Do you see a patient and directly go and do the note every time before you see the next patient?
No. So it's kind of evolved. So
Yeah.
of course we used to do written notes, and then we got electronic, and now we have our own electronic. So we went with the company, now we have our own, and our own is really fast now.
Okay.
So I can save it for later and get them done pretty fast. So not a big deal there. I used to have an iPad, and I would just be pecking a screen with my finger,
Yes.
and this was really, really hard on me. And I was, over the course of 4 years, I was realizing that my handwriting was getting worse. And it was bad. And I couldn't focus because the screen would kind of be rolling up and down. And it really got to me. So I switched to a computer. But then I also went back, because the whole handwriting thing was bothering me a lot. So I went back to writing my notes. So, which I like, because then I can talk to the patient and watch the patient at the same time. Yep. And the conversation and the flow is so much better. And it keeps me away from the computer screen, so I'm not there 10 hours with the computer, which kind of bothers me in some ways, but we don't have to get into that. So that has been really nice. And my handwriting's coming back, and I have better clarity. And then when I go to my notes, they're actually faster than me trying to do the note while I'm with the patient, because I have to look at the screen and figure out where I'm at. And think about what to press and what just happened, where I'm just writing and it's flowing, and then I just go back. It takes like 5 minutes to do it, less than 5 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
It's really simple. So, and then if I have a doc time or cancellation, I just get caught up, and it doesn't, unless it's a bad day, then I'll stay late, but it's really been working out good for me. So I like how it is going right now with a little bit of writing and some typing.
So in addition to what you're just talking about, if you were going to talk to someone who's like had it to their wits' end, realizing that you can't change the system that they're using or the software, what advice would you give to the clinician that's just inundated and got an hour's worth of notes each day?
Oh gosh, I think it's hard to say, because there are some EMRs that take a long time.
Yeah.
If ours took a long time, I probably wouldn't be doing it this way. I'd have to come up with a better solution. What I can say is that for my evals, I do use the McKinsey evals, because it flows well and I can talk to the patient and write, and it's just more efficient for me. I don't know what other people would say about that, but it's just better for me. And then I have that assessment that sometimes I can use as some case study work for my courses I teach. So that comes in. I have them right there. And then sometimes I like to refer back to them, because it's just so simple to look at that form, because I've used it my whole life. I've used the form more than I've used EMR. So I like just having that glance. I can look at the form and glance at it and see everything I need to see. And it is just really fast. I don't have to scroll. I have to go back in different pages. So it's just easy for me. So I don't know how it would work for others. I do recommend using the assessment form, especially for new learners, because it keeps you focused on really investigating the problem mechanically.
Right. Yeah. So I'm glad you're in a good place with documentation because a lot of people aren't as privileged or fortunate.
Yeah, it's really a nice system.
Yeah. Perfect. Excellent. Well, I'm sure you're home by now. I don't want to keep you longer than you got people that are probably knocking on your window saying, "Come on in, mom." Uh, so
They might be waiting for food.
that's right. Waiting for dinner. Kristi,
I've got
thanks.
two boys that are super, super hungry all the time.
Right. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, go in and make some dinner. And thanks for talking us through a couple patients, chatting with us a little bit about other disciplines and working with your nurse practitioners and all, and even a little chat on documentation. Kristi, we appreciate you joining the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
And there you go with episode 403 with Kristi Maguire. Thanks to Kristi for allowing us to ride along with her. I know it'd be easier just to stay right at your desk and in your area and treat your patients. But I hope you've heard Kristi. Stick your neck out there, work toward better interaction and communication with other discipline providers. They need to better understand what we do for the sake of their patients. Keep your assessment hat on and don't put that treatment cart before the diagnosis horse with your patients. And good luck with documentation, but don't settle. Keep looking for ways to improve for your own sanity. And actually, it's a perfect segue into reminding you of our sponsors. Atlas Health, a more precise and professional way to deliver exercise and education to your patients. If you use in-range, repeated movements, and sustained positions, and you teach patients to test and retest their motion, and you're still using pictures from Google, hand-drawn stick figures, or even a patient's phone, welcome to the 21st century. Get your first 25 patients exclusively here at MCF. Go to atlashealthx.com/MCF. Click to sign up and enter the information and the code ATLASMCF25. And our other sponsor, Therapha. If you could use a better way to intake your patients, gather the relevant information before the patient even arrives, and make you more efficient, check out Therapha and take advantage of this generous offer of 2 months free. You'll find that special deal at therapha.com/join/MCF. Therapha is THERAPHA. All right, thanks for coming along with us on our ride today. Be sure to come back next week and hang out with our next guests on the ride home for more of sharing experience for improved patient care.